Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome on board and selamat siang semuanya. Good day everyone. Welcome to our webinar Big Build It Green Series 5, presented to you by Department of Architecture, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Indonesia. So today, Thursday, September 10th, 2020, we will deliver discussions about understanding the sustainability concept in architecture. So as you can see here, we have several terms and conditions. Please have it read. Okay. Thank you. Now, we would like to thank our sponsor and also supporter. Today, coincidentally, we have two sponsors from state-owned enterprises. The first one comes from PP or PT Pembangunan Perumahan, and the second one comes from Waskita Karya. And also we have the support from Green Building Council Indonesia or GBCI. Thank you. So for participants that already registered, please also resign through the link that is given by the committee to get your e-certificate. Please don't forget to read along the terms and conditions. Thank you. Okay, now please allow me to introduce myself. My name, again, we meet again here in this webinar. My name is Ova Chandra Dewi. You can call me Ova. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Architecture, Universitas Indonesia, Faculty of Engineering. Okay. And today, among us, we already have two top speakers. Yeah. The first one is Dr. Ken Yang Dipo, and he's an architect and also very well known for his work on ecology-based signature architecture. And then the second one, we have Professor Insinyur Gunawan Cahyono, who is also very famous on his consistency in developing vernacular architecture in Indonesia. Before we begin with this seminar, I would like to read along some schedule in this webinar. The first one, right after this, we will have the opening speech from our Dean of Faculty Engineering, Mr. Dr. Henry D.S. Budiono. And then we will start with the presentations by the speakers, and then discussions, and then we will wrap up with the conclusion, and then we will have closing statement from our head of Department of Architecture, Dr. Ing Dalhar Susanto. And in the end, there will be like a small announcement from the Green Building Council. Okay, before we start, attendees can ask questions to the panelists by using the following link. We also give this link into our YouTube live chat. Okay, to make it more condensed, for the participants that already registered in our website, please input the link to your browser to confirm your attendance. Okay, so I would like to say hi first of all. Hello, Pak Kenyang, Mr. Kenyang, can you also turn on your camera? So, hello, sir, again. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. So the second one, our speaker is Professor Gunawan Cahyono. Hello, Prof. Gun. Your voice, because it's mute, Pak. But it's
also okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry about that.
It's okay. And we also have our Dean of Engineering Faculty, Mr. Henry D.S. Budiono, PhD. Hello, Pak Henry.
Hello, everybody.
Your camera is off, Pak.
Cannot because the host not allow me to the video on.
Okay. Mr. Alvin, can you do that?
Okay.
Okay.
No. Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Prof. Ken and Prof. Gunawan, and also Prof. Dalhar.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Henry. And then also now we have the head of Department of Architecture, Pak Dalhar. Hello, Pak Dalhar.
Hello, good afternoon, Kak Ova, everybody.
Okay,
nice to meet
thank you, Pak. Thank you, Pak Dalhar. And we also have one representative from PTPP. It's Mr. Wildan Nahdi. Hello, Mr. Wildan, Pak Wildan. I think he's one of our alumni as well.
Yes, correct. Hello. My
Yeah,
voice is can clear?
yeah, yeah, it's clear, but your camera is still off.
Hello, everybody. Hi,
Okay.
nice to meet you all.
Hello.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wildan from TP. So we also have here our technician, Alvin, and also Alice will stay with us. So in order, we really hope that there will be nothing seriously happening, yeah. But these two person will be with us until the end. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, our sincere guests and audience and participants, please welcome the opening speech from the Dean of Engineering Faculty, Mr. Henry D.S. Budiono, PhD. The time is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Bu Ova. Good afternoon, everybody. Our sincere speakers, Prof. Gunawan, Professor Kin Yang, Head of Arsitektur Department, Pada Lahar, all guests, lecturer, and student. I forgot to, PP and Waskita Karya, there is Mr. Wildan Nahdi this afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Again, let me say good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to the webinar BIG, Built in Green from Department of Arsitektur, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Indonesia. Actually, this department is one of my favorite. I remember when I will choose become a student at university. Actually, I want to enter the architecture, but change to mechanical engineering. So actually, I very like and I very to know more about architecture. This year is the fifth series of a webinar. Is titled "Understanding the Sustainability Concept in Arsitektur," presented by Arsitektur and Sustainability Cluster. Today on September 10, 2020, we delivered this webinar to mark the beginning of the new academic year 2020-2021 in Universitas Indonesia. The pandemic has stricken our world globally and pushed us to think beyond. By consistently providing the best education quality while staying at home, this webinar tells the pandemic should not limit us. Instead, it triggers us to think more creatively and across border. Just for your information, during February until August this year, at least the Faculty of Engineering Universitas Indonesia, we have 18 research products that go to not go to market, I say, but go to our community to for COVID-19. From our architecture side, as I know, they have one design of modular isolation unit for COVID-19 patients. Hope that this design can help us to in the future. Here with us, Dato Professor Dr. Kin Yang, a very well-known worldwide green architect, and the principal of T.R. Hamza and Yang, whose design masterpieces have been served as inspiration to sustainability architecture. Their work proved that architecture and contribute significantly to the sustainability will also increase the human space and comfort in doing daily activities. Also, our teacher, our father, our what you can say, everybody can say, everybody knows well about Professor Gunawan Cahyono, our emeritus professor in vernacular architecture, who has been consistently sustaining Indonesian architecture and education, and is currently still active in preserving the value of traditional architecture. Our sincere speaker, guests, lecturers, and students. Today, webinar is the fifth series, which has originally set up to celebrate 55 years of Department of Arsitektur. Still young, but a lot of activity from Department Arsitektur, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Indonesia. This webinar serves as a sharing platform for scholars, professional architects, students, and anyone who has interest in architecture and sustainability. It brings a message that everyone can contribute to sustainable world through responsible designs. Finally, I would like to convey a quote from Frank Lloyd Wright, an architect whose name is certainly familiar. He said, "Study in the nature, love the nature. Stay close to nature, it will never fail you." Oh, nice. We hope you all can enjoy this webinar, and we certainly hope that what will be discussed today can be useful for you and for the sustainability of this year. In this, let me say thank you for the sponsor, PP and Wasita, Mr. Wildan Nahri. Without your participation, it will difficult this webinar happen. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. Back to Ova.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Mr. Henry, the Dean of Engineering Faculty, Universitas Indonesia. So without further ado, I would like to begin this webinar as Pak Henry already opened it. So we welcome the presentation from Mr. Kenyang. Mr. Kenyang, are you ready?
In a minute. Can you move this down here? Oh, yeah. I'll move it down. Okay, open it up. Okay, thank you. Good. Well, thanks very much for having me. I'm going to talk about basically my current work and thinking, and what differentiates what I do from other green architects is that we look at our work as an ecologist. And so in many ways, when I did my doctorate, I had to study ecology at the same time. So the title of my talk is Designing for a Resilient Planet. And I'm going to explain the principles that underlying my work. The first basic factor that influences our work is that our designing must be ecocentric. It must be based on the science of ecology, because everything takes place on the planet, and and in fact, ecology is the units in nature is ecosystems, and ecosystems is defined by many ecologists as their concept of nature. Now, the ecologist sees the Earth as covered by a thin film that is called the biosphere. And then within the biosphere, there are different layers, and the biosphere is easily impacted by everything that we do on the surface of the planet. Within the biosphere, there are units which are called ecosystems. Ecosystems consist of communities of plants and animals and physical environment acting together to form a whole. And so this holistic property is very important. It's not just putting vegetation buildings, but you have to see the interaction of the communities of plants and animals with the physical environment. Now, to articulate this further, communities of plants and animals consist of plants, animal communities, and the microbes that exist in the soil. And physical constituents are the site characteristics of the climatic features and the soil and geological features of the locality. Now, within this group of communities of plants and animals, there are processes which interact in very complex ways, which we cannot see. Some of these we cannot see. That's why nature actually is a lot more complex than we think it is. Now, within the communities of plants and animals is us as human beings. We are one of the species in nature, but we're different. We're different because we are the most powerful of all species. We can change the landscape, we can change the waterways, and now we change the climate, and now we change the ecology of the whole planet by itself. So this is what makes us different. We have immense power over nature. And with this immense power, we have to exercise this power with great care. And it's the fact that we haven't exercised our power in nature with great care and concern and love of nature that is the cause of many of the environmental problems that we have today. Now, we make things. I call this the built environment. Built environment is not just buildings, but artifacts, everything that we make, machines, clothing, cars, equipment, computer, handphones. In fact, of all the species in nature, we make more things than any other species. In fact, we're cluttering the whole world with things that we make. But I call this a built environment because it's not just buildings, but everything that we make. Now, the cause of environmental concern today, devastation, impairment today, is because of ineffective biointegration of our activities and our built environment and our technology with the ecosystems. If it's effective integration, there won't be any issue. So that is the challenge of what we must do as architects. Now, the fact that it is not effective, then we burn fossil fuels, which have taken thousands of years to be created, and then this gives out smoke and pollutes the air. And so, what happens if we integrate these effectively within nature? So my contention, my second principle, is that everything depends on effective biointegration. Now, this is easier said than done because it's extremely difficult to do this, but this is the objective of designing for sustainability, to biointegrate everything that we make, we do on the planet with the natural systems on the planet. So this is a very important premise underlying our work. And so then I thought, well, what happens if we make our built environment as constructed ecosystems? We emulate and we replicate our built environment to have the properties of ecosystems. In which case, then our built environment becomes part of the ecosystems. And so that is the objective of ecological design, is to convert and make our built environment into constructed ecosystems. And at the same time, our human society is ecocentric, that everything that we do relates to have minimal impact on the natural environment. And so together with these two principles, that is the basis for ecological design. And so that's the third principle, to design our built systems to be like ecosystems. That's what I call constructed ecosystems, means human-made ecosystems. And to be able to integrate these together, then that is the ideal condition. Now, the third point is that when we design, we must design as scale of infrastructure, not as individual buildings. Most green buildings, most green architects are very good at designing green buildings. But at the end of the day, it is ineffective in dealing with our impact on the natural environment. So now this is existing city. Existing city is a series of infrastructures. It's the roads, the drains, the bridges, the electricity grid, the water supply, the sewerage. And then what green designers do is that they build green buildings on top of the infrastructure. But what happens is that my contention is that we should start with the infrastructure itself. That infrastructure itself must be green. What's the point of designing a green building with an infrastructure which is not green? So, this is the second principle of green design, is that if we design our infrastructure as green, then it's much easier to make our city green, to make our city into a constructed ecosystem. And so my point is that ecological design has to start with infrastructure. If you don't start with infrastructure, then you're just doing incremental buildings here and there, but the built environment will remain the same. The electricity grid will get its energy from burning coal. The water system will be from the groundwater, or the sewage system will just pollute the waterways. And so that's the third principle, is that we should start with infrastructure. Now, what are the infrastructures? The first infrastructure I call nature, because nature itself is an infrastructure, because it has a series of biomes and ecosystems. The second is hydrological system. Now, hydrology is part of nature, but I've taken this up because water is an extremely important part of nature. In fact, when astronomers look into the telescopes, look at planets of Mars and Moon and other planets, the first thing to look for is signs. Are there signs of water? Because where there is water, there is life, and so water is a very important factor in design. So I've taken it out of nature. It is part of nature, but it is an important factor in design. And then the next is human beings. Human beings, again, is part of nature, as one of the species, but we are separate because we are very powerful and we're able to change nature. And then we make things. And the third component is the built environment, the roads, the drains, the sewage, the water supply, the buildings, the ports and the wharves and so forth. And that these, to me, are the four basic infrastructures that we must biointegrate into a whole. If we're able to biointegrate these four infrastructures together, then what we have is an ideal situation. And so this, if you like, is the theory of what I do, is that we need to biointegrate nature with the water management and with our human society and with our built environment. I color code them. I call nature green. I call them, human society red, because that's the color of blood, and built environment I call it gray, and the water blue. And so the biointegration of the green, red, blue, and gray is what ecological design is about. So that's nature, human society, built environment, and water. And this biointegration has to be seamless, has to be benign, and has to be harmonious. So that is what ecological design is about. And that if you expand this into what exactly does it mean, then nature is resource conservation, reconnecting nature, rehabilitation, and so forth. So these are some of the articulation of some of the factors. And diagrammatically, is I use the Chinese yin yang symbol, but it means a harmonious balance of all these four factors. Here's an example of a project that we did in India, in Bangalore. It's a small estate. On the right-hand side is the forest reserve. And so the first thing we did was to have a spine that collects the species in the forest reserve. And we try and create the green infrastructure. So all our design starts with the green infrastructure, which is trying to rectify the damage that human beings have done to the land. And so in this case, we stretch the infrastructure across the site. So this becomes, if you like, the means in which species can move across the site and try and connect to adjoining sites as well. And so this is the master plan itself. The green is the infrastructure, is the spine that collects it and goes across the entire site. And then the gray, so this is the green infrastructure. The gray is the roads and the distribution network of electricity and the sewage and the water. And then the blue is the water system, where the water that is from the surface goes into the roads and into the drains. And these then go back into constructed wetlands and into retention ponds within the site. And then the red is our human society and our different communities. And so the principle, as I mentioned earlier on, is that if we create our built environment as constructed ecosystems that emulates and replicates the attributes of the ecosystem, then what we have then is a situation where we are integrated with nature. Now, then I started to look at what are the attributes of ecosystems that we must emulate, we must copy, and we must replicate if we can. And so these are some of the properties of ecosystems, such as, for instance, ecosystem structure, the biodiversity in ecosystems, connectivity and nexus, ecosystem services, biointegration, responsive to climate, cycling of materials, hydrology, symbiosis, homeostasis, food production, and so forth. Now, nature does this for us for free. We don't have to pay nature to do this. We don't even have to force nature to do this. Nature automatically does this for us. But it's very important that we emulate and replicate these properties. Now, this is what ecological design is about, because we have to continuously invent, find ways to do this. I don't think we're able to do this 100%, not even within my lifespan, but this is something that I hope that others after me or with me will try and do as much as possible. Now, the first ecosystem property is biological structure. As I mentioned earlier on, ecosystems consist of both communities of plants and animals and the physical environment. But if you look at our existing cities, if you look at our existing built environment, everything, especially looking around you, is abiotic. So then where is the biotic constituents? And so to do constructed ecosystems, we have to bring the biotic constituents into our built environment. And so this was one of the first things I did when I first started the ecological design. And so I started to look at ways in which we could put greenery, put biotic constituents into buildings. So the first row of diagrams is the master plan. You can either put all one location, which I call centralized planting, which is not desirable. Second is have a dispersed planting spotty system, as in Georgia and London, where you have a series of squares. Third is a stepping stone where it is continuous, but not quite linked, but close enough for some species to move from one patch to another patch. But the fourth diagram is the ideal one, because where the vegetation is linked, it weaves into the urban areas in terms of ecological corridors and fingers. At the bottom, row is how you apply the same concept into buildings. You can have it all in one location. You have a spotty relationship. You have a stepping stone series of patches. But the ideal one is the one on the right-hand side, in which everything is linked and connected. And so these were preliminary thoughts that influenced our work in designing and shaping our buildings. Of course, ideally, they should not only be linked to the ground plane, but it should be linked to the ground and then go up to the top of the building as well. So everything is linked. And because in nature, we should try and enhance the connectivity of have ecological nexus, so that the nature is linked rather than as separate patches. And so this is a scheme that we designed in Singapore. It's not built, it is in Waterloo Road. It's a competition scheme. And that what we did was to have a spiraling system that goes all the way around the building with planting continuously on the outside. And so it goes all the way to the top of the building. And these are the plans of the building. And it's a cultural building. You have galleries, you have cinemas, little cinemas, you have, cafes, you have little library. And it was a competition that we did about back in the late 90s. So maybe it's about 20 years ago. And we didn't win the competition, we got second prize. This was the close-up of the scheme. Now the idea was that to try and, once we reached the roof level of the adjoining building, we bridge across it. So in this way, this building then becomes a motivator, a catalyst that seeks to green the city as much as possible. But this is just a system in which we could link the city with greenery. So this connectivity and nexus is very important. So we need to be able to link the cities which has been fragmented by human beings. See, what human beings do is that whenever we go to a part of nature, we cut it up, we chop it up, we fragment it. And so we have to rectify this, we have to correct this, we have to reconnect nature and then and make nature whole again. So this is what I try to do with this project, where here I brought the vegetation in a ramp that goes all the way up from one part of the site to the other part of the site. And this was an inspiration diagram drawing that I did for myself, is that, back to the earlier scheme that I did, the continuous ramp that goes all the way around the building with vegetation going on all the way around. But with this scheme, I put a walkway next to the continuous vegetation so that from the walkway you can service, you can look out, you can service the vegetation. And so this ramp, then I call this a linear ramp because we've extended this 1.5 kilometers long. And so eventually it took me about 10 years to get it built, to get this idea built. You can see the walkway, you can see the vegetation, you can see the facade of the building and the sun shading on top. Now this is a solarized building in Singapore. And that, as you can see, the ramp with every facade, I climb one floor. And so in this way, the building then has a ramp system that goes all the way up to the top of the building from the ground plane, as you can see on the right-hand side, with the diagrams I showed earlier on. And this is the building seen from a distance. You can see the angled ramp. So that with the ramp, we cover one floor. The buildings on the left-hand side, the two towers, are by the famous Japanese architect Kishio Kurokawa. And so these are the ramps with the vegetation going up, and this is a close-up of the ramp with the walkway and the vegetation. But I have mid-level gardens where these are sky parks. We have one at the mid-level, halfway up the building, and the other is on top of the building, and where I have quite large trees. But this linear ramp, it's not just it hits whenever it hits a corner, or these two corners, it opens out into sky chords. So it's not just a continuous linear ramp, but it's punctuated by a series of sky chords. And these are the sky chords in the top of the building, and it enables people from inside to interact with people on the outside. On the right-hand side is a building, which you're working on with sky chords alternating between the built area. Then now, in effect, the building is just 2 blocks separated by an atrium. And so mid-level is the sky courts, and this is the roof garden on the uppermost floor. Now the Singapore's green accreditation system is called the Green Mark, and they have certain criteria. The requirement is I have to meet a greening area of 6, but in this project we've got 12.2. So what it means this is that even though in your country or wherever you are at, there is a requirement like your green rating system, you should treat the green rating system as a guide, and you should surpass it as much as you can. Now the building actually is the master plan for the building is done by the famous Iraqi architect Zaha Hadid, and so she gave the shape of the site to us. So we just followed the shape of the site. So that explains the shape of the building, but of course we curved the edges to make it a much more smooth and more comfortable corners. But what it actually consists of 2 blocks A and B, which is linked by its facade, and in between is an atrium. And then above the atrium is the natural ventilated space, and the atrium has louvers, which on a normal day, it is, and when it rains, it closes. When on a normal day, it is open to let the air out, so that the atrium itself is not an air-conditioned space. I just have some cold air blowing into it, that's all. And so this lowers the energy consumption of the building. But when it rains, it automatically shuts. And then the 2 blocks are joined by bridges, A and B. You can see on the diagram on the right-hand side, you can see the bridges. And this is the bridge linking the 2 blocks with the atrium on the right-hand side. And this is one of the bridges, and that's the entrance from the front. We have a number of experiments. One of the experiments we have is what I call a diagonal light shaft. Instead of a vertical light shaft, it's diagonal, and this diagonal, opens out into a big void, And this big void opens out into the courtyard and into the sky. And this is looking up the diagonal shaft from the street level. And this is looking down from the diagonal light shaft. And this is the daylight entrance, daylight penetration into the building. It is not ideal. I have two deep floors. The floors are just too deep, and you can see the blue color. The blue color does not get an awful lot of light. You have to supplement it with artificial lighting. And this is the view of the diagonal light shaft looking up. Then within the site, we have an eco-cell. An eco-cell is the collection of all the rainwater that goes all the way down to the ground floor. And this brings the rainwater and the vegetation down to the basement. And so this is a diagram of how it works. And you can see the eco-cell on the little white box on the right-hand side. And this is what eco-cell looks like. So you can see the vegetation spirals all the way down to the basement. The water goes all the way down to the basement. At the bottom, we have a collection tank, or we could have a bioswale there, or we could, I haven't done it in this building, which is the living machine. Now, nature is very biodiverse. Biodiverse is very important because what humans do is that we simplify nature. We simplify nature and reduce it to 1 or 2 species, and that has a terrible impact on nature. This is a building that we finished. We did it in about a year ago, and it is an office building at the Putrajaya capital city of Malaysia, which is about 20 minutes from Kuala Lumpur. And it's right next to the wonderful bridge. Our approach in ecological design is to create habitats within the building. Habitats means places where species can live and survive. And we can put them, we call them green roofs. We have vertical greening, green sky courts, atriums, constructed wetland and detention ponds on the ground plane. We could have green links to the hinterland. And of course, you have the green eco-cell. The buildings are almost symmetrical. There's about a 15-story with a podium underneath. And that in between, I have a promenade. The promenade actually links to in the axis to the Millennium Monument, but the shape of the building is like this because of the promenade. We get left with 2 residual parcels, and from there, we started to put in the built-up floors. But on the right top row, the top row in red, are all the habitats we create within this particular complex. Now, one of the things that we need to be aware is that the building is at 2.9 degrees above the equator, and so it is you can see it's a fairly high level of biodiversity. It's almost as high as you can get. And so we started to prepare what we call a biodiversity matrix, where at the top column we have all the habitats, and then on the left-hand column, on the left-hand axis, we identify fauna that have disappeared from the site that we want to bring back to the site. Once we identify fauna, then we look into the type of flora to attract the fauna. And then once we have this matrix, it becomes a basis for the landscape design. So we call this a biodiversity targets matrix. It becomes a target in which you try and make the site into, again, is what I call a constructed living ecosystem, so that we integrate the built-up area with habitats and with flora and fauna. So the whole building then becomes a total living system. And that is what I'm trying to do, and what I think we should all try to do with all our buildings, is to make our buildings into living systems. And so this is the fauna that we want to bring back, and then this becomes the basis for the landscape design. Now the building is that little white square, and it lies along the axis that leads to the Prime Minister's office. But from our buildings, there is an axis that goes to the Millennium Monument, which is a monument by the waterfront, which is like a little spire, which was also designed by us several years back. And this is the monument in the context of the Ministry of Finance buildings, which is on the right-hand side. Now, between the 2 buildings, as I mentioned earlier on, is a promenade This has, relaxation area with trees and planting in a series of planting areas behind it. We wanted to experiment with the facade of the building, that instead of having conventional sun shading, we said, what happens if we use glass, which is fritted? And this enable, then if we, even though the inner plane is flat, the outer plane can be shaped and faceted. And so the idea was to try and facet it like a diamond, and that we had to start to slice it, to cut it. But the pattern that we use here as the fitted web pattern is about 50% of the glass area. And there are a series of panels which are not exactly butt jointed, but they have an air gap in between so that hot air can go out. And then the pattern is actually a songket pattern, is a Malay traditional pattern for their high, for their high-end weaving of gold onto cloth. And so this is the cultural identity. When people look at it, they can see this, that, oh, this is a Malay building. That's a building that's a Malay cultural reference. But does not replicate nature in 100%, just replicates it in a pattern of the outside. Now, it is a double skin wall. So it is the outer skin, you can see with the glass, and then with the air gap in between. The inner skin is a flat wall, so that the walls of the building, even though the building looks faceted and shaped, the building itself has flat and straight walls on the inside. Now, the average office building uses about 210 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum. And so the glass as sun shading reduces the energy consumption to 138 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum. So this shows that as a substitute for horizontal louvers is quite effective. That it actually reduces by about 60 to 80%, 50 to about 40% of the energy consumption of a conventional building. So you can see the two buildings and the axis from the roundabout going on down to the monument. But on the west side, we shaped the wall a little bit, so because this has reduced the solar insolation from the western sun. Then the greenery, we brought it from the first floor going all the way down to the basement in what we call the eco-cell. This was the master plan we did about 10, 15 years earlier for the Kowloon waterfront. And here we had a series of eco-cells. Eco-cells are basically voids that we cut in the podium that goes all the way down to the basement, that brings vertical integration of vegetation, rainwater harvesting, natural ventilation, daylight, and at the bottom we can put a Bioswale eco machine. And so this is the green eco-cell in this project. You can see the vegetation going all the way down and it's weaving its way into the basement area and right to the bottom. So there it is the building that is next to the very famous bridge. And now I'm not going to be able to describe all the ecosystem attributes today with you, but the fourth aspect I wanted to present is what I call provision of ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are things that nature, again, does for us for free. Now, these are the things that nature does for us. It produces oxygen, it maintains the biological genetic diversity, purifies water, and so forth. Now, this is all done by nature without human intervention. We don't have to pay nature to do this. Nature does it for us for free. And these are some of the characteristics that we need to emulate. We need to replicate as much as possible. Now, of course, this is an ideal. It's almost impossible technologically for us to imitate this, but this is something we must try and endeavor and invent and try and do. And so, for instance, nature produces oxygen. We can no way produce enough oxygen, for the whole planet in the extent and level that nature does. Nature sequesters and detoxification of human and industrial waste. It absorbs the pollution that emits to the air. But again, it's almost impossible for us to absorb all of this, but nature does it. But the fact that we have now exceeded the capability of nature to absorb and sequester, that is the cause of climate change and the cause of, and is the cause of environmental deterioration. So I thought if we can't imitate this, we can't replicate this technologically. We should augment our built environment with with nature as close as possible, and we should weave our biological constituents into the ocean fabric so that we can produce, nature produces the ecosystem services within our built environment. And so the idea was to have a secret ecological corridors. We weave the ecological fingers and corridors into the urban areas. So this was a scheme that we designed in the Reunion Island, which is east of Madagascar. And so you can see the ecological fingers sticking out, and then the green fingers on waterfront. We have, again, a spine along the waterfront that collects all the species, and that we bring this back into weaving the two together. So you have a series of fingers, the green fingers, and a series of urban fingers. And so, this is, so in this way, the greenery is so close is close enough with the urban fingers to provide ecosystem services like oxygen, sequestering, and so forth, right next to the urban areas. Otherwise, if you do it like let's say in a series of parks, then it's too far away to be effective. The average dimension we decided was about 30 meters wide for the fingers and 20 meters between each of the urban fingers. And so this was the idea, and that the edges should be not orthogonally straight, but we should be weaving. It could be undulating, because this enables species to hide, species to reproduce and so forth. Now then, hydrology is very important. I mentioned this earlier on. What we've done is that we should close the loop as much as possible, and those water that we cannot recycle or reuse, we should bring it back to the ground, rather than otherwise it goes to the drain, it goes into rivers, and it's gone forever. So on the right hand side, there's some of the means in which you can bring the water back into the ground. Now for the black water, we should have a series of treatment ponds, which are called constructed wetland. It goes from a settling pond on the right hand side to the wet woodland pond, to treatment marshes, and to polishing pond at the end. So in this way, it is a natural treatment of black water of sewage without using any mechanical systems. And so ecological connectivity and nexus is one of the key things. But today I only got 20 minutes. These are some of the things I've been able to cover in our work. But on another occasion, I could give a longer talk, and discuss the other aspects, that we do in ecological design. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Dr. Kenyang, for your comprehensive presentation. I cannot imagine how happy also the other audience can see your track back also in this bioclimatic design. As I understood, you also have a new book, right? This early year.
Right.
The title, Saving the Planet by Design.
Yes.
Okay, so congratulations. Pak Kenyang, because we want to have two speakers in this session, Now I would like to welcome Professor Gunawan Cahyono. He would present as a expert member of Green Metric Universitas Indonesia, and he will deliver a presentation about built green potential roles for Indonesian architects.
Okay.
Prof. Gunawan, are you ready?
Okay, let me have the share screen. I don't know whether you got it.
Not yet. Okay, it's loading. Now you can turn it into a full screen back.
Okay, let me see. Good afternoon, everybody. It's very difficult to talk after Dr. Kenyang, of course. I'm glad that he provides all of you about all of this technical and also design instrument for us to go green. Okay, let me start with some questions. First, can all of us stop breathing for 5 minutes? I think it's only The Bajau tribe can do that. They are water people. If not, then we have obligation to keep the air we breathe clean. I think nobody can object about it. But what keep our air clean? It's leaves. Hence, it is our obligation to plant more trees. Hopefully, the tree can go up like the proposal and also build evidence by Dr. Yang. And then the second question is, can we stop drinking for 5 days? Suffering, probably you are not dying. If not, then we have obligation to keep the water clean. Nobody can deny it. As water is a gift, doesn't mean we can waste its presence. I think Dr. Yang had already provided you a lot of examples about that, so I don't have to provide you any slides. Then, conserving water is our obligation. Land and water form the image of Indonesia. We have tanah air. I think you understand about this. So conserving and managing land plus water become the obligation of Indonesian architects. So this is just image. And then the third question is why we build. Before we answer why we build, we have to answer build for what and build for whom. So the main purpose of building is to offer meaningful human activities. But in order to have activity going on and meaningful, the environment it builds should be healthy. Hence, it requires fresh airflow and sufficient clean water. Building stands on a surface. Thus, it has the obligation to replace the existing potential of providing air, cleaning, and water conserving elements in order to sustain the future generations. I'm sorry because the rain is so hard, so it will disturb some of the voice, my voice. As human beings, we ought to protect the needs of our future generation should we want to live sustainably. So what constitutes a sustainable environment? Protect the environment so it will in turn protect us. This is, I think, a good proverb. Waste are the burden for environment, so we need to reduce, reuse, and recycle them to ease the burden of environment. Accordingly, a less waste environment offers healthier living conditions. Nobody can also deny this. Carbon emission is harmful for the Earth's climate. We know all about the climate change. Indonesia plays significant roles as a tropical rainforest, and then we need to respond about it. So our obligation is to reduce the emission. This means we are obliged to adjust our lifestyle by save energy at all fronts, consume less gasoline fuel vehicles, less air conditioned indoor, but fan and fresh airflow indoor. Then we need to conserve more plants and last but not least, eat less meat. I had already visited a lot of Indonesian remote area and asked the elderly, which can live very healthier in their 80s and also 90s, some of them. They confess that they only eat meat at the rituals events. So unlike our urban citizens. Then air, water, waste, transport, and energy have been mentioned for ecological consideration in sustainable environmental program. Yet a sustainable environment is the environment that fulfills at least three main aspects or factors. They are ecology. I think Dr. Yang had already quite explicitly explored all of that for you, which had been mentioned also. Then economy, which has yet to be thoroughly studied for its green aspects. Of course, we know President of the United States doesn't buy this concept. And social equity, which has become the most difficult aspect to be dealing with as society changes rapidly according to advancement of each civilization. We still have homework, so our homework will be to set up strategy to balance these factors. So what should we build and then what should we develop? Developments are mostly destructive and harmful to environment. I think it's a very few people can deny it unless you can decide like Dr. Yang. Governments have paid too much emphasis on economic growth rather than ecology and social equity in their development programs. This led to unsustainable results and endanger the future generations. So sustainable development goals come out as a prospect by United Nations for a sustainable future for the world. SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, become major measurement for Indonesia as she had committed to the UN's decision. And as higher educational institutions stand, we know that higher educational institutions stand at the forefront of change. We have all of the intellectuals living there. We have many students can be our agents to spread out our ideas. Thus, Universitas Indonesia responded it by expanding UI Green Metric criteria to match the certain goals. So now let me introduce a little bit about UI Green Metric. In 2010, Universitas Indonesia had launched UI Green Metric World University Ranking to rank universities around the world for its sustainability in environment. But only 95 campuses in 35 countries had participated in 2010. Yet we are quite happy because in 2019, 10 years after the launching, 780 campuses in 85 countries participated in UI Green Metric World University Ranking program, including Oxford University, which ranked at number 2. So, UI Green Metric World University Ranking set 6 criteria. At the beginning, it has only 5, but now it's expanded into 6 to be measured with clear indicator. They are sector and infrastructure, climate change and energy, waste, water, transportation, and education. These are the criteria and the measurement and also the point you can get. Setting infrastructure, we put 15% of the total. Energy and climate change is 21%, waste 18%, water 10%, transportation 18%, and education and research 18%. How much the percentage is had been discussed by expert members. We invited a lot of outside expert members on green also. This is just show you about in 2010 at the bottom, only 95 universities participated and 35 countries. So 2019 we have 780 and 85 countries. What will be the problems ahead? architectural education in Indonesia is highly appearance oriented. So they care more about form, but doesn't care so much about ecological balance or sustainability development. Architects in Indonesia succumbed to the desires of the owners who are mostly greedy for profit developers. Environment is not an issue for most developers and architects. Then developers look for complying to less environmentally concerned building regulations. Consequently, the city pay the cost for environmental damages, such as land subsidence, decreasing green coverage, polluted water, polluted air, congested traffic, untreated waste. When the pandemic sends citizens to their home, it's time to rethink all planning policy. Then design a solution. I think the example had already provided by Dr. Yang. Thank you, Ken, for that doing so. So I don't have to get any example anymore. Design is basically deontic, a morally embedded activity. Accordingly, architects ought to take full responsibility for the failure of their design. Hence, they ought to think various consequences on physical and social environments prior to start batching official regulations. So now, sustainable development goals become the norm to measure building proposals for municipal review. So architects need to answer what contribution their project will offer to the city to ease her burden. In it, images of Indonesia ought to be also addressed. Then they can fulfill the desires of the project owner. So just give you some example. In UI Green Metric, we had already fulfilled at least 14 of the 17 sustainable development goals. Of course, number 1 and number 2 is probably very difficult to fulfill and probably not the duty of the UI Green Metric team to measure about this. And I think I end up my presentation with this last slide. And thank you very much for participating in this webinar.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Gunawan Cahyono, the member of Expert UI Green Metric. So after having these two presentations, very thoughtful presentations, I hope all of the participants in the YouTube also have like a, how to say, like a burning energy after hearing these two presentations. So, but please don't go anywhere because now we are about to start the discussion. Yeah, Pak Ken and Pak Gun can also maybe can have a drink for a while because after this we'll have the battle. Okay. So again, thank you so much for the presentation, Pak Ken and Pak Gun, for this very lightful webinar. I would like to have the first questions. Yeah, we will have 2 sessions of presentation, questions and answer. The first one is coming from me. Yeah. Okay, the first questions is for Pak Ken. It's very light questions, Pak, but I hope you can explain it to our audience. So, Pak Ken, what is the nature of sustainability in architecture, Pak?
Have a seamless and benign relationship between our human society and our built environment with nature.
Okay, so you put already the red in human, yeah, Pak. We're grading. I can see that the reason why, but can you also explain it why, Pak? Why human in the red? And yeah, the plants, the greeneries, they are greens, the water are blue, and the human are red. Is it because of the threat?
No. Well, our human systems is not just a human society. These are social, economic, political, educational, and institution systems. Now, I read that the color that I use is just a metaphor. So it is not, there's no other meaning, there's no symbolic meaning. I use red because it's the color of blood.
Oh, okay, okay. So it's positive, ya, Pak.
And so, and then water is blue, and nature obviously is green. And that most machines are gray color. So I got red, blue, green, and red.
Ah, okay. So that's the rationale.
That's a metaphor that I use for communicating with people, that's all.
Okay,
That's
got it, Pak.
no political or any other implication.
Okay, okay. So thank you, Pak Kenyang. So that's the first question. The next question I would like to raise more or less similar to Pak Gunawan.
Yes.
Yes. So Pak Gun,
Okay.
do you have additional comments to note that what is the nature of architecture in what is the nature of sustainability in architecture? Maybe you can also relate it to Indonesian architecture or vernacular architecture in Indonesia, Pak. Please.
Wow, that's a big question. Big question. I should not lecture about architecture anymore here. Just go to the dictionary. Because you ask 10 architects, they will have 11 answers,
Okay.
right, Dr. Yang? So just go to the dictionary. Architecture is the art and science of designing and constructing buildings. Then we need to define what building is. Is that a set of spaces integrated to offer meaningful activities for human to live in it? So if we take that explanation, that means architecture disappear, but the work of architecture appear. Like Dr. Yang, let's say, he has the whole knowledge of architecture, that is his, but he need to express it through his work. So we can enjoy architectural work through, we can learn architecture through architectural work rather than reverse. Now into the sustainable architecture and also green architecture, I think as a designer, architect is to take the responsibility to answer the future generation. So we need to not only conserve our landscape and nature, but also we have to raise the consciousness of our society in order to sustain this as an action rather than stay in the textbook or so. Therefore, when we start the green metric, we need to really think about the philosophy behind every action. Therefore, I ask the question, can you stop breathing for 5 minutes? Probably you will die. So it is our responsibility to conserve the clean air, actually. And now the COVID, the pandemic, sent us home. We now work from home. So it's time for us to rethink our action. Probably at the first, more than 100,000 years ago, our ancestors domesticated themselves in order to become civilized, less savage, and then less wild. We have to learn that lesson. But at that time, they don't have city, they don't have property. Possibly we now need to think about, is civilization harmful, or we should embrace a new method to give civilization alive again. By stopping a lot of desires, rethinking about home and home environment, possibly we can save our city. But the problem is that in Indonesian case, not everybody can afford this internet or remote learning process. Because I should say so, we are at the elite class whoever attended this meeting, this webinar. You cannot deny that. But we are only the top 2% of our society. So who else we should take care of? Probably we have to rethink all of this urban planning system. We put the marketplace now become a center of the activities. Possibly the kampong you have to revive, make the center of kampong as a collective learning activity after the COVID probably. So we can still recover and re-evaluating the domestication process to rediscover our home. So that's what I think we need to do that.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Gunawan. So for your questions, whether can we stop breathing like 5 minutes? Even if I should you wear mask, it's already hard for me to read actually. So thank you so much, Prof. Gunawan. Actually, the first question, what's the nature of sustainability in architecture for both of you is how to say, is our approach to sit on the same level. Yeah, because we are dealing with word sustainability, and we want to understand what is actually sustainability in architecture. Thank you so much, Prof. Gunawan. So, Pak Kenyang, do you want to respond to Prof. Gunawan's answer?
Well, I think Prof. Gunawan's work is important because it talks about clean air and clean water. And basically, that's what we should try and do: clean water, clean air, and clean land. And that is our objective.
Okay.
We
Thank
all
you so
want
much.
to have clean water. And then people say, of course, there are many urban issues: poverty, unemployment, you have urban crimes. We have to address and solve these problems. But if we don't have clean air, clean water, and clean land, it's even more difficult to solve these problems. And so if we have clean air, clean water, and clean land, it makes addressing our urban issues much easier. Because otherwise you have to, while addressing the issues, you have to make sure the air is clean, or the air is not clean, water is not clean. Then it makes, our work in helping humanity a lot more difficult.
Okay, so actually it's related to the biointegration you mentioned in your presentation, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Pak Ken, the second question for you for today. It is still related to your previous answer, actually. It's about to represent a holistic concept of sustainability in architecture.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, what are the additional aspects to speak the language of economic, social, environmental concept in architectural design, sir?
I think we have to change our living habits. The trouble with our modern society and modern marketing, if you like, it makes people want to have more and more things. You go to the shops, you're encouraged to buy things, but you don't need that many things. I only have 5 shirts, five underwear, and 5 socks, and 5 handkerchiefs, and 3 trousers, and 1 pair of shoes. That's all you need. I don't need to have any more shirts. I don't need to have anything else. But why do we need so many things? Because we just encouraged to, the commercial world encouraged us to buy things. We should live much more simply. We don't need that many things. And so that's the first thing I would ask people to do, is to change the lifestyle, to change the mindset, having more and more things. And that we should make all our industries and all our institutions become green. Our universities, as Pak Gunawan says, should become green, but not just physically green, but the lifestyles. Like for instance, we have a lot of food waste. And so we should try and reduce the production of food, don't over order, and we should try and recycle waste and separate it as much as possible. We have a lot of packaging that we don't need. We have a lot of things that I was mentioned, things that we don't need. And we should make our life much more simpler. But that requires a total change in mindset in human beings. And that is outside my capability. I don't think I can do that. And it is the behavioral changes we should try and change people. And that is somebody else's, or somebody else should try and do that rather than I try and do that. I can only suggest that it is important to do it, but it's for people to decide for themselves.
Okay, it's very interesting. I think both of you already sounding like the same approach. Like we need to reduce our willing, because we just need some of pairs. We just need some minimum square meters to live with, for example, like that. Yeah. Me myself, I studied about waste management, and it's related a lot to our behaviors actually.
Right.
So the second question maybe is still related to what we just discussed now to Pak Gunawan. Yeah, Prof. To speak about the identity and values. How do you think sustainability is embedded to Indonesian architecture so far?
Okay. Many research had been done about land. That's we got a lot of research, and then of course any identity are also attributed to land area. I was surprised when I visited the sea people. So land and water, the water part of the identity had not been studied quite fast. I learned a lot from them because they can change their religion in every 6 months. It's according to who comes. If the minister come, then they will become Christian. If Mualaf come, then they can turn into Islam. It depends who come. Then, so the sea people has a very different concept on existence in the world, and they live very simply. So I think what I want to emphasize on Dr. Yang saying is that we need to differentiate need and desires. What we need is actually very simple, but what we desire is more. We want to make ourselves identify to certain group, to certain religion, certain race, and also, so we change ourselves. Also, the built environment, I think, we accordingly towards our action, the change, then that create a different identity. The lesson from water people, I think, is quite surprising me, and I feel very sorry about sea people. Will not have a concept of property like the land people, because you cannot divide the sea like a piece of land. So we are already trapped into kind of what we call the liberal capitalism. Nobody escaped that right now. Me too. So after the COVID or during the COVID, which sent us home, then we think about, do I need a lot of clothes in front of camera, in front of my students? No. Actually, I don't have to wear pants in front of you. You cannot see that.
That's all.
So, and who wants to show themselves glamourly now? It's no way. So the industry will be hurt very much is fashion industry, probably cosmetic. You don't need to show off yourself anymore. So it will stop your desire to make you identify. What hurt more probably is the change of tradition, because our religion asks us to pray in mosque and also in the church, also in this public gathering area. Now, COVID sent us home, right? Even you cannot have a Hajj now in Saudi Arabia. Very limited, only. So what can we do? We need to change. We need to adjust ourselves in order to run the civilization. And also, I said urban planning should be also changed. The government put a lot of money to infrastructure. It's right. But now you have to prioritize the infrastructure of internet rather than infrastructure of road, making more bridges also. I think this is what we need to teach our remote areas children to use this device so they can, this is the concept of Professor Taking Soon as well. His urbanism. In order to raise their living, then we can take the money down, then leave the business going up again. If we only think of ourselves without thinking of other people, then the disaster is awaiting for us. Okay, I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah. But Prof. Kun, still related to that answer, actually, still related to our discussion. We mentioned about the tradition change. We also mentioned about the behavior of the human itself. But to continue, in Indonesia, we have plenty of renewable energy sources. Let's say solar, water, biomass. We are spoiled by that one, that kind of things, right? Do you have any opinions according to this kind of consumption in terms of energy, Prof. Kun? Maybe you have issues of comments.
Yeah, we cannot just talk. I think Faculty of Engineering has already demonstrated that in the campus of University of Indonesia, we are now more and more using the solar panels to generate the electricity and also the water power. What we don't have is kind of wind energy because the wind is not so strong in Indonesia context. So we need to make use all of this. And as intellectuals in the campus, we need to create new things. What I am proud of UE Grimatic is that Oxford University also joined us. We had already set the standard for the world. So we can do that. Indonesia can do that. Malaysia can do that. So we need all of these people who are thinking in the saving the world's direction, rather than spend our money to buy things, make us richer, and also, but all of the waste we will send out to you to recycle it. Recycle, if we get downcycling, it's not good. If we can get upcycling, then it's really better. So I think it's right, the social equity problem, to let the consciousness into the widespread society, then they can change their attitude rather than make it an action.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. Gunawan. I think a lot of very sensitive and strong message behind the discussions. And it's all related to what humans do. Okay, so we back again to the questions to Pak Ken, Mr. Ken, yeah? Yes. I would like to discuss about the research method that you dealt with Pak Kenyang. Maybe you can share with us about the research method based on your experience. Is there any in-between processes that architect must accomplish or understand to apply the sustainable concept into the design? The short questions is, what is the basic considerations? Thank you.
Well, it's about 5 questions in one question.
Okay. Okay. Mhm.
First,
Okay.
I think research method basically is a cyclic process for me. That means, we design, we develop ideas which becomes research, and then we try and implement the research by design and building. And what we learn from research, from design building, we go back and feed the research. So it's a cyclic process of research, design, building, rethinking our work, and then doing more research again. So that is basically a cyclic method. And then you see, sustainability isn't the only factor in architecture. I think that architecture must do the following things. First of all, it must be functional. It may be sustainable, but it's not functional. Then, it's a useless piece of structure. So architecture design has to be functional. It has to work. Second, has to be beautiful. And that's, we as architects, artists, we are trying to make beautiful. The other day, I saw a building in New York, and somebody said to me, it is the LEED Platinum building. And I said, yes, but it's, the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It looks like a prison, and it's done by a famous American architect, and maybe platinum, but it's just very ugly. And so the second factor is that it must be very beautiful. The third factor is that it must meet criteria. It must be within cost, must be well built, must meet authorities' requirements. And then the fourth criteria, it must be green, obviously, that we talk about. But the fifth criteria, I think, is probably one of the most important ones. And that's the one I start with when I'm designing. How to make people happy. And whenever we have a project, we talk to ourselves and say, what can we do here to make people happy? It could be creating a place that is happy. It could be environment. It could be something simple. It doesn't have to cost an awful lot of money to make people happy. And if you're able to make people happy as an architect, your whole purpose in life as an architect is fulfilled. And so I did a house, a couple of years ago for an Australian family, and they had their own ideas of what sort of house they wanted to be. They wanted to have a courtyard in the middle and everything around it. But what I've done is that I created a swimming pool between the sleeping areas and the living areas. And it's a huge pool that goes to the side of the building. And that they can wake up in the morning, they can jump in the pool, or when they're in the living area, you can go swimming. And a critic went to visit the house because they were writing about the house in a book. And they asked the Australian family, what's it like living in this house? And they said, we're living in paradise. Now, when I heard about this, it just made me immensely happy, because then I've made them happy. As I had touched them, I have changed their lives. And so that's what being an architect is about. Making things green, making things, work, making things as functional. These are just, anybody can do that. This is, over time, it is just, we would do it as part of our second nature. Making it beautiful, it is subjective, but to make people happy, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. And it's just finding ways to do it. A few years back, I was in the French city of Bordeaux, and between the road and the waterfront, the architect or the planner had cast a plaza of about 100 meters by 100 meters, or no, about 60 meters by 60 meters, and is recessed a few inches into the ground. It's covered with granite, and that every few minutes you have jets that blows, diffuse water. You have a diffuse a jet of mist into the plaza, and these jets are at about 4 meters intervals. And that I was there on Sunday, and people were singing and dancing and were happy in this plaza. Then after a while, the jet stops, the water is drained away, and then it starts again every so few minutes. And it doesn't cost very much to do this, but it is a way to make the public immensely happy. And so that is what we should try and do. We should invent things that make people happy, and that's what architecture is about. And that's what being an architect is about, is that more than just, functional, become sustainable, making it green, making it practical, and making it meet authorities' requirements, get developed, built within cost, how to make people happy. That is what we should be trying to do all the time.
Okay, so thank you so much, Pak Kenyang. I think about this happiness thing, it's also related to our emotion, right? So
Yes.
maybe if we relate to the current pandemic, we try so hard to make our physical health, right? But in terms of physical health, we also have mentally health.
Yes.
And this can also come from the happiness, right?
But what is important is that studies have shown that happiness, there isn't a one-to-one correlation between happiness and wealth. And also, you don't have to have a lot of money to be happy, And happy is an inner thing, and you can, And this study shows that yes, from developed countries to undeveloped countries may not have the wealth of developed countries, but people are happy, and so happiness has not a one-to-one correlation with wealth.
Okay, the point, Pak Kenyang. So, Prof. Gunawan, do you want to respond to this question, or do you ready to have another questions from me?
Well, I think Dr. Yang had already made a very strong statement about the responsibility of architects. It's also make it an ethos, I think, is more important. But how to turn only the capacity of designing and the ethos is the problem of education. So we teach students to become smart, but the student can use what we give them or what we equip them to make a wrong thing, right? Don't forget that a lot of these bandit or mobs are clever people. So I think as designer, you can do no wrong. It's rather contradict to Peter Eisenman. I think he wants to make his client suffer sometimes. But that's not our education here. Quite right. Make people happy. The problem, we cannot put happiness in Uyghur metric. Is that it's very difficult to measure. That's the only thing. Okay, but thank you, Dr. Yang, for mentioning it.
Well, oh, do you still have things to say, Pak Kenyang?
No, I'm
Okay.
happy.
Yeah, you're happy. Okay. In this discussion, I feel like I don't know. I've tried to reflect it into myself actually. So I don't know if I have the obligation. I might prefer not to say anything because I knew I done a lot of on that direction. Sorry. So thank you so much for the discussion. Prof. Gunawan, I would like to have
Okay.
Prof. Gunawan, I have only one question, last one before I give it to the head of the department and also the representative from PP. The question is about the UI Green Metric itself. Prof. Gunawan. So actually, what is the message for the world through this UI green metric? Because it's for the university, but university also have users, and these users can go anywhere, right? How to maintain that this sustainability also applied wherever she or he belongs, not only in the university. That's the question. Thank you, Prof.
Okay. After 10 years, we see the impact of OE climatic, especially on the developing countries. From the 780 universities, majorities are in the developing countries, in the third world, rather than the first world. American universities and also European universities participated in our green metric. Some of the university had already also advertised what their ranking in UI green metric is for their campus. And this become a kind of power. When they, in Iran, I think if I'm not forgetting, when we conduct a workshop in Iran's university, the minister joined the discussion. And the minister said, okay, if your university rank down, then we will stop the funding for you. So the impact is quite big through university. University has a lot of this intellectual and also the student as agent of change, right? So we just put this into action and we push them to become greener and greener. So many universities had already changed their environment through the greenmatics measurement. And many universities changed their light bulb into the energy efficient one. They plant more trees and then they put more action on waste management. They conserve the water. So we see a lot of change in it. And we had also met a lot of university as our organizer in their country to make change through Go Green. So now we are also refine our criteria and try to put in some social and cultural aspect into it. So is the university inclusive or exclusive? So the more inclusive, they get a higher point. Right? The more exclusive they are, the lesser the point will become. Okay. So we encourage a lot of this social change, which I think is morally right to us. I don't know for others. So I use this measure also, but not all of the criteria, to evaluate the building whose proposals are putting into the municipality for review. So that's make change too. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. Gunan. Pak Kenyang, do you have any comments regarding this UI green metrics, Pak?
No, just that I think most important thing is to study ecology. And we should change the curriculum of your schools of architecture to teach ecology. Because once you study ecology, your perception of the world changes. You see the world very differently, that you don't see yourself as the dominant species. You see yourself as part of nature. The whole philosophy and everything changes. So I think, and then it affects not just the way you think, it also affects the way you do, and the ways that you live, the things that you eat. So it changes you completely. And hopefully, if people study ecology, they will change the institutions as well. You see, the trouble with my generation is that my generation of architects who are in practice now, but have large firms and even small firms, are not brought up in ecology. They think that a rating system is the ultimate in designing green. And so I almost have given up hope on now existing my generation of architects. It is the next generation that I hope will then, see the importance of understanding nature, understanding of designing for nature, and that is the next generation I hope is our future. But for my generation, it is too late, because to try and explain ecology, to explain designing with nature to people my generation, it's an uphill battle. It's a long fight. And so, to summarize, I would advise schools of architecture to teach ecology and to see how it influences the different aspects of how an architect design. Because once you understand ecology, the way you design becomes very different. The way you build becomes very different. The way you operate buildings, the way you recover buildings at the end of its useful life becomes very different. So you need to close the loop as much as possible, ecology. But if you don't start thinking about closing the loop, then you only see all systems in the throughput way. You take, you use, and you throw away. But in the planet, there's no away. The planet is the planet. So you throw things away. It's out of your system, but it's still within nature. And so, you have to avoid, let's say, a throughput system to a cyclic system where you close the loop. But people don't think like that unless they've been brought up as ecologists. So to me, studying ecology is extremely important in schools of architecture.
Okay. Noted. Noted. Because
And you started some 35 years ago, right?
50 years ago. 50 years ago, 1970.
I am so happy that both of you can speak here and say hello to each other and in good health conditions. It's very good.
Prof. Gunawan used to work for my very good friend Adi Mosid.
Yeah.
Adi's a very good friend, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Kenyang and Prof. Kun. Now I would like to give this session to Pak Dahar. Pak Kenyang already mentioned about changing the curriculum into ecology education, some kind of courses like that. Maybe Pak Dahar can say something. Pak Dahar, please, Pak Dahar. As he is the head of the Department of Architecture.
Okay, thank you, Kak Ova. So in this afternoon, I'm very happy. And first of all, I would like to thank you to both speaker, both presenter. And frankly speaking, I have noted many quotes from both speaker. Important quote also from Mr. Kenyang and also from Prof. Gunawan. So today we have again discussed about sustainability that actually is already old enough, this issue, but this issue getting important and important. And today we have a new perspective, new statement about sustainability from both speakers. From Mr. Kenyang, that we are familiar with him as a bioclimatic architecture. Today we get to key point that important for us. First is about the constructed ecosystem, that built by human being, that we can build still sustainable. And sustainable architecture itself is not meaning greenering the building, but the important thing is to provide the green infrastructure. And the green infrastructure is not only physically, but human itself is also infrastructure for the green infrastructure. That's for me is very interesting. Also from Pak Gunawan, we get also new perspective about how to implement this sustainable way, sustainable concept, especially from the side of university as an agent that can promote and also endorse sustainable concept into the implementation, especially for the campus itself. It is also important for us. So thanks again to the both speaker. And finally, I want to mention that this activity, this program, this afternoon, actually part of our program of celebrating 55th of establishment of our Department of Architecture, Universitas of Indonesia. So thanks again for the participant, to the organizer, Kaova especially. Thank you, and hope that we can enjoy the next program of our celebration. Thank you, Kaova.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Daha. But don't worry, Prof. Gunawan already shared like applause. It's we are still in the middle. Pak Kenyang also, so sorry, we are still in the middle because I'm still collecting the questions from the floor. We have like almost 600 viewers in the YouTube channels. I think they are like now competing to have the opportunity to raise questions to both of you.
Maybe just
So-
want to, because I have to go back to work.
Oh, okay. Like what time, Pak Kenyang?
Have to go and earn some money.
For sustainability of
For
your
sustainability. Okay, so let me go to Pak Wildan. First of all, Pak Wildan, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have questions, Pak Wildan, to one of the speakers, or maybe do you have your own, on behalf of PP, some comments, please?
Okay. First of all, I would like to congratulate for this event, and my opinion about this event is very important, especially to provide some insight, especially to the students and the society in general. And we also very grateful to the community for the opportunity that it has been given to us, especially to PTPP, which is really concerned about sustainability constructions. And it's quite interesting, even it's very interesting from the discussion that Dr. Yang conveyed, that especially regarding the green infrastructure, which in the end will produce an effective eco-centric city. As a builder, we often find some cliche problem or classical problem where it is quite difficult to match, is quite difficult to match the private sector's orientation, especially with regard to the benefit and cost ratio to the green infrastructure, which in our perspective, somehow the initial cost will be slightly higher, especially if you talk about the 20 OVS expected rate of return of investment. I have some question. In your view, in your best experience, what should be the good relationship between the architect, builders, the government, and the owner if we face this situation, so that an effective and optimal ways can be made, which in the end, the sustainable ecocentric city can be developed effectively. I think that's for me.
Okay, so thank you, Pak Wildan. So Pak Kenyang and Pak Gun, because Pak Wildan is representing state-owned enterprises from Indonesia, maybe one of you would like to start to answer first, maybe in a quick, Pak Kenyang or Pak Gun first?
Pak Kenyang, I think is addressed to Dr. Yang.
Okay, please, Pak Kenyang.
Um, everything starts with a budget. And that the greater the budget you have, the easier to make a building green. And that is an unfortunate factor. If you're doing a low cost affordable building, you're fighting for money already to make the building as economical as possible. And to make the building green, that becomes very difficult. The only thing you can do with affordable and low income buildings is to make it passive mode low energy. That means without the use of any energy systems, it is comfortable. And that involves proper orientation of the building, proper shaping of the building, facade design, making use of wind and so forth. But I was talking to the building that I showed, the building in Singapore, the Solaris building with the ramp going up, was built at 6.5% over industry's construction costs for that equivalent building type. And so if this is industry's building type cost, building cost is 6.5% more. But that building was designed with energy and water savings. There's about 70 cents per square foot. And that over 5 to 8 years, you get your money back, your capital costs, you amortize your capital costs. And so, after 5 years or so to 8 years, you have recovered your capital costs, but the building continues to save energy and water. And so this is the real benefit, the commercial benefit of a green building, that it saves energy and water, and it creates a healthier microclimate within the building and outside the building. But that should not be the reason for why people do green buildings. You cannot, it's very difficult. It's not fair, it's not right to judge a green building on commercial reasons. People do green buildings because it's an ethical thing to do. They do it because it's the right thing to do, and they want to do green buildings. So, that is very important. And if I have an ethical owner, then I would say, if this is the industry standard for that particular building type you want to build, we should build it for, give it a higher budget, 25% if possible, to make it super green. And this is what developers should do. They do it because it is the right thing to do, and not because they can get the money out of it. Or people always say to me, why should we build a green building? Because it costs me more money and I'm not going to get my money back, But you say, it is morally a good thing to do, and you should do it because you want to do it. It's just like saying, if you have plants in your building, doesn't it cost more to maintain it? No, I said it's like having a garden. You have a garden, you have to look after it. Otherwise, why do you have a garden at all? And so, then people say, well, how are you going to maintain the greenery in your buildings? Then I have what I call the gardener index. So I say this building is 3 gardeners, this building is 2 gardeners, this building is 5 gardeners. And gardeners' salaries are not very high. You just pay for the gardener's salary, and you pay for replacement of the soil and the planting and the fertilizers. And so if you have, like any other commercial buildings, you have a wireman. You have a man who looks after the amenity system in the building. And so in the same way that you have a wireman, you should have a gardener, you should have the engineers look after the water and the electrical systems. And so that is, to me, the future of green building. It has to be, if you want to have a green building, you have to prepare to take care of it. If you have a car, you must wash it. You cannot have a car and you don't wash it and expect it to stay pristine and in good state, and you have to service the engine. So you have to service the engine. And so if you have a green building, you have to take care of it, you have to maintain it, you have to look after it, and you have to look after the greenery and looking at the planting. That is our obligation with having anything. We have to take care of it. So that's my final words.
Okay.
When we say to me, oh, you better difficult maintain it, this and this. I said, no, you have to. If you want it, you have to be prepared to do it. If you're not prepared to look after it, then don't have it.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Ken. I think it's clear, Pak Wildan, yeah? Okay, thank you so much, Pak Wildan from PP. So, Pak Ken and Prof. Gunawan, to be fair to the audience, we have like more 3,000 now viewers in playback in our YouTube channel. I would like to make it shorter, yeah? But I have one question for you, Pak Ken, and also one question for Pak Gun, yeah? The first question is for Pak Kenya. It's coming from Intan Vindana Firisco from Arsitektur ET. And she has questions. Your buildings always have continuous green linkage in the building.
Have what?
Your building always have continuous green linkage in the building.
Yes.
However, my question is how these green links are integrated into each single interior space.
We should try and bring it into the interior and exterior as well, because in nature, everything's connected. But you have to ask, why is it continuous?
Yeah.
You see, if it's not continuous, then the patches of greenery have a short life, because after a while the species run out of resources, they don't get the chance to interact, and that if it's connected, then you have a larger pool of natural resources within the ecosystem for the species to share. So this enables a much more stable ecosystem. By being more diverse and being more stable, it requires less maintenance by human beings. And so this connectivity is very important, but it should connect it not just within the building, but also to the basement, to inside the building, and to the hinterland as well, to the outside. But at the moment, my connectivity is very slim and very narrow, and it's only through a series of strips. So ideally, it should be nice and broad and wide, and that the abiotic constituents should almost equate the abiotic constituents. But that is, that is a hypothetical scheme that I have in my head. And in reality, I find it great difficult to get somebody to do that.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Kenya. We will go to the last questions for Prof. Gunawan. This is coming from Tria Amalia Ningsih from Jakarta. And the questions is, what is the ultimate purpose to bring the whole ecosystem into a building besides placing human eyes or feeling guilty of destroying Mother Nature with our architecture? Thank you.
Can you, sorry, the last part of the question.
Okay, let me read it again. What is the ultimate purpose to bring the whole ecosystem into a building besides placing human eyes or feeling guilty of destroying Mother Nature with our architecture?
Okay, it's Dr. Yang had already demonstrated that putting more green can also be attractive. I don't use the word beautiful, but at least attractive. It's quite different approach. So there's no harm to do that. If we want, the problem is probably how do you convince your owner or the one who hired you as architect? Do they want to spend more money at the beginning, but save more after the running of the... That's the point, probably. A lot of technique, you can browse a lot of it. It's a lot of examples. But like Dr. Yang Harry said, it's ethical problem for you. You are not as fortunate as I am, Ken Yang, because I sit on the architecture reviewing board for the city. So I have the power, ask the question for the developer. If you take out 1 hectare of land, this land I can plant 1 hectare of tree. Then can you replace all of the tree leaves in your design? Because you only sacrifice less revenue rather than you get revenue. It's a benefit, but you only sacrifice a little more than to let the architect do the job to replacing the leaves that I can plant into the design of your building. So I should exercise my power, actually. Otherwise, they will only calculate the costs and benefits of their building. Right? So it's quite successful. I think so many developers hate me by not practicing as an architect as you are, but I am exercising my power.
Yeah.
Possibly that's, to me, it's a kind of good thing to do. That's why I still keep going on that. As long as I'm the chairman, Dr. Dalhal is a member of that. So as long as most of our members support my idea, that's the most important thing. So we can go green if you have power. You probably should run for, let's say, Ridwan Kamil run for the governor. Now we got, probably you should run from the prime minister. Probably is too far, step by step. Sit at the city and push your idea.
Yeah.
Right? We need to play politics as long as it's ethical for us.
Thank you, Prof. Gunawan. Pak Kenyang, I would like to hear your answer. Sorry, I would like to hear your answer from the questions of Prof. Gunawan. I know that you didn't really address these questions to Pak Kenyang, but I would like to hear your answer about this 1,000 land and the trees.
Well, back to the politics, I think to become a politician, you have to have a certain mentality. You know, you have to be able to talk to people, and you're able to wheel and deal. You know, for instance, if you ask me a question, I said, "Oh, give me a week. I think about it, and I'll tell you the answer." But some of my friends can talk standing on their feet. You know, Prof. Gunawan mentioned Taking Soon. Taking Soon is an incredible person. You know, yeah, he can answer questions standing on his feet, as you know, before you even finish your question, he's got his answer ready. I don't have this sort of mentality. I'm not a politician, and I prefer to let other people do it because I just cannot do it. It's not in my nature to be a politician. And I'm going to tell you, now that you're about to end, I can tell you a story about how clever a man Taking Soon is. I was flying from Beijing to Singapore together with him after a conference, but there was something wrong with the plane. And so we were stuck in Singapore, in Hong Kong airport, in a lounge. And so we're sitting in a lounge. I was looking at him, he was looking at me. And I said, "Oh, Kingston, let's talk a bit about architecture." And Kingston, being the difficult man that he is, he says, "You and I will never agree." I said, "I don't even know what subject you're talking about." He said, "You and I will never agree." So I said, "Okay." So we were silent for a while. I said, "Oh, how about this piece of writing? What do you think of it?" He said, "It's nothing. You should read between the lines." You see, the English expression, "to read between the lines," means there's a double meaning. So I said, "Could it mean this, this, and this?" He said, "No, no, 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 no. You know, you should read between the lines." I said, "Could it mean this and this?" He said, "No, you should read between the lines." Finally, I said, "Kingston, I give up." "What do you mean by reading between the lines?" He said, "Look at the text. Between the lines, there's a white space. There's nothing there." Anyway, that's my story for the day. I think we should end now. I have to go off. So thank you, Gunawan. It's very, very good to see you again. You look so well. You look happy. You look busy, and you're doing all sorts of nice things.
Yeah, because I can exercise my power.
Like muscle. Pak Kenyang, before we end this webinar, I also want to say sorry to all of the audience in the YouTube because
What I suggest to the
Kenyang
audience,
needs to
what I
go to-
suggest to the audience is that they have a question, they can write to me.
Okay, so you all of you can write it into the YouTube channel chat, and we will pass it on to Pak Kenyang email. But Pak Kenyang,
yes,
can I also have your few words about architecture and sustainability in relation to the pandemic? Maybe like short words, Pak Kenyang. And also apart from that, I would like also to hear from Professor Gunawan about architecture and sustainability, but in the relation to the globalizations. That's all. I will not ask for more again.
Okay. Well, you know, the other day I listened to a lecture given by somebody in Harvard Business School about the pandemic. This is, there are three things you must do. First one is to accept that it will not go back to normal again. It will be changed, it will be different. And the sooner you accept this, the better it is. Accept that it will not be normal again, and that accept the situation and get on with it. get on with life. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that your resources are very important. With the endemic, there's a recession, there is difficulty in getting income, difficulty in getting business, and the way you work is much slower. So you have to marshal your financial, your physical, and all your resources. You have to manage your resources well. And the third thing is that be positive. You think ahead and plan ahead and implement it. Don't wait for things to change before things get better. And so, those are the three things. Accept the situation, marshal and manage your resources. The third is to plan and go ahead. And that was the advice that was given to me by this Harvard Business School professor. And I said, that's great advice. That's what I'm doing. And so, rather than sit and be unhappy or worry about this, worry about that, just get on with life. That's how I see it. Yeah.
Very nice, Pak Kenyang. I think it's already in your blood, so you're saying it like flowing just like that. Thank you so much. So, Prof. Gunawan Syayano, please.
Yes, good to have you, Dr. Yang. Anyway, I learned a lot from you. Actually, the pandemic provide a lot of lessons for us
Yes,
to
sir.
learn and then adjust ourselves. But we cannot go back to history.
Yes.
And our future is still city. Nobody wants to go back to the rural area and live like a peasant or farmer. So how to make these both values together for our future? Think basically first. Differentiate the needs and the desires. Can you reduce your desire, just fulfill your need? Then you will make a basic, what I call the primitive, rather than not the primitive line. It's a kind of very basic stuff. Le Corbusier also got the primitive man, right? Primitive man. So go back to the nature and think about that for the future. City is a kind of hard place. It separates the nature too far away already. Now we need to make a continuum. Possibly, Dr. Yang had already provided some example to continue this the greenery of the nature, bring it into the city and become a kind of network. So I think what makes Ken Yang different from King Soon is that he is thinking larger scale. You cannot make the building green without make the city green first. It's a good lesson we have to learn from. So when we think locally, act globally, it's good for us to also, from the detail, go into the wider perspective and then look at the thing. Then we can learn a lot. So I just advise the architect to rethink our primitive, actually, but don't go back to the primitive life, of course, but learn from the primitive to bring it into our future. That's probably my message. Oh, your mic.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you so much, Prof. Gunawan. So the last slide will show our wrap up. Just one slide for today's discussions. Okay, I will not read all of it, but today we already discussed about understanding the architecture context in sustainability concept in architecture. So I'm now like in a rush. The first one is about three important principles. First one is designing must be ecocentric based on science of ecology. Second, everything depends on the effective biointegrations. And third, designing must start at the scale of the infrastructure, not an incremental build system. So it's also the purpose of the building is to offer meaningful human activity, and in order to have the activity, the environment should be healthy. Hence, it is our obligation to protect the environment and It will, in turn, protect us. So we are one of the species in nature, but we are different because we can change the nature. Thank you so much. So now I would like to call all of our team member for the last photo session, Pak Kenyan, also Prof. Gunawan, also Pak Dalhar. Please say cheese, maybe. We will have a group photo together.
For
With all of the
photographs.
team, yeah. As the wrap up, this is the final, this is the climax. For Indonesian, it's very important, Pak Kenyang.
Okay.
So wait. Okay, so I will count into 3. Please, after 3, all of us should deal with our teeth. It should be seen. Sorry. Okay. So, okay, is it already all of them? So I have actually 4 teams, from 4 group teams, Pak Kenyang, Prof. Gunawan. I
Okay.
have from the content team, also the proposal teams, the marketing teams, and also technical teams. And many of them are also young lecturer, also part of postgraduate master students, and also from part of them are also the students from our bachelor. Okay, now let's say cheese. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, need to put more smile, I think. More smile, cheese. Okay, one more time. Cheese.
Okay.
Okay, so now Pak Kenyang, you may leave now. Prof. Gunawan, you may leave also. Pak Dalhar Susanto, thank you so much for being here. All of the committee, thank you so much for this worthy
Thank you.
discussions. And we will meet again in some other occasions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Gunawan, bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
So we will now continue with the short
Thank you, Fasil.
announcement from Green Building Council Indonesia. Alvin, can you do that? Thank you. Okay, so that is the announcement from Green Building Council Indonesia about the workshop at Zero Healthy Master Classes. It's already ongoing and it's about to continue, I think, about until next month. So you can also register in the links that is given. Okay, before we close to our webinars, again, we would like to say many thank you to all of you. Pak Dalhar will not be here because he gave it to me for the closing sessions. We would like to thank again to all of you, to our supporter, PT PP, Pak Wildan, thank you so much. And also PT Waskita Karya, thank you so much for the support, and also again support coming from Green Building Council Indonesia. Thank you so much. Thank you for participating in Big Webinar Series 5. Do not hesitate to give us any feedbacks regarding this webinar. simply by typing the link below into your browser. Okay, this is given. And also don't forget to follow our social media platforms. We have Instagram, we have also YouTube, and we also have Facebook. Please stay tuned. We'll come back in the next week for more interesting and team and also the speakers. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Stay healthy.